So feel free to put those into the chat as we go along, and Sadie will help us keep track of that. Just for a little bit of context today, we all know that in the field of advancement and fundraising, transformational gifts are often celebrated as the pinnacle of success. And yet, many nonprofit organizations really feel that large scale philanthropy can be both unrealistic and even seem a little bit out of reach for them. But it doesn't have to be that way. Nature Conservancy of Canada offers a prime example of how really just reframing our mindset and our approach to our most significant donors can result in meaningful, and yes, I'm actually going to say it, game-changing philanthropy for all of the parties involved. In fact, using the campaigns of one approach that we're going to discuss today, Nature Conservancy of Canada was able to open conversations with donors that resulted in $35 million in gifts over the last 36 months. So I'm very excited to introduce my guest today. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Nancy Newhouse, and Nancy leads the British Columbia region of Nature Conservancy of Canada. So welcome, Nancy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So pleased. And she is joined by Krista Shepard. And Krista is the Senior Director of Development and Communications for Nature Conservancy of Canada, also in the British Columbia region. So welcome, Krista.
Hi, Maria. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. And it's nice to see the two of you together. Kind of fun.
Yeah,
I like
it
it.
doesn't happen all the time. So we're thrilled to be side by side. We can nudge each other and, you know, give each other little hints.
I like that.
Yeah.
Nice to have that. And I have one more person I'd like to introduce everyone to, Scott Arthur, who wears a couple of different hats. So Scott is not only the Vice Chancellor of Advancement for the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, he is also my colleague and a senior advisor for Huron. And he is the one who partnered with Nancy and Krista in the approach that we plan to share with you today. So I'm really glad to have Scott in the room with us and part of the conversation. Scott, say hello to everybody.
Everybody, happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
We're not going to dive into all of our backgrounds or anything like that. You do have our bios in the webinar materials. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our conversation here today. So I'm going to start, Krista, I'm going to start with you. Just because I know you're the one that really kicked off the work that has taken place over the last several years. So tell us all a little bit about Nature Conservancy of Canada and really where you were prior to this work. And I'm really curious, what actually led you to pursue training in principal gifts?
Sure. Yeah. I might go back a little bit before NCC just to set a little additional context, Maria.
Sure.
Mostly because I've been working and had a relationship with Advancement Resources for quite a while. So I remember getting training with Advancement Resources, which is now Huron, 10 years ago when I was working with the University of British Columbia. And I just loved what I learned in the workshops that I participated in. So found really tangible learnings and tools that really helped me advance as a fundraiser. And so when I subsequently moved to NCC, to the Nature Conservancy of Canada, Advancement Resources, now Huron, was the first that came to my mind when I thought about training and helping fundraisers and helping my team. I came to a small team here that I got to sort of work with and build. And so I started thinking about what kinds of trainings do I want to expose them to, as well as myself. And so I attended a couple of workshops again with Advancement Resources. And then actually I joined a webinar just like this one where Scott and his partner at the time, who's now retired, Jim Hodge, talked about their work that they've been doing in Changing Hearts and Changing Minds was what it was called at the time. Now it's Campaigns of One. And I was kind of blown away by the content. Like there was something innately that I knew as a fundraiser that didn't totally sit right with me when I was so focused on metrics and having conversations that didn't seem natural. And so to see Scott and Jim really outline that and lay that out there and go even beyond what I could imagine for having conversations with donors, it was just kind of like a light bulb aha moment for me. And it was like, I have to expose my team to this. And so I went a little step further than like actually just sending them to the workshop. I ended up having Jim and Scott come in and do a 2-day intensive workshop with my team and also with Nancy and some of our other senior leaders. And that gave us a real opportunity to dig into those tools, into the learning. And we spent a lot of time talking about like actual donors that we're working with. And so it kind of continued on from there. And in fact, we still have regular coaching with Scott. And we spend a lot of time sort of in the details of our day-to-day thinking around major gifts and our donors. So it was a great
Excellent.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So Nancy, you're the one, Krista comes to you with this crazy idea of bringing this into the team. What thoughts did you have at that particular point? That's a little bit unnerving sometimes to bring new ideas in.
I'm a step off the ledge and look later person. So I was excited about the idea and have an inherent trust of Krista's judgment. So when she said she thought it was going to be productive, I was like, okay, let's try it. I just loved, I mean, for me, it's hard to separate between Krista's approach and Scott and Jim and Advanced Resource and Huron's approach, because they're all coming from a same place of authenticity, building meaningful relationships. And those to me are such core values, and they go beyond philanthropy for our work. We talk about relationship really as the currency that we do all of our work, whether it's working with First Nations or ranching communities or donors, the principles apply. And so it's just a real gift to be so comfortable in that space.
Wow. Well, and thank you for those kind words. I agree. That is definitely a philosophy that we all share in this work and the importance of this work. I just want to clarify a couple of things that Krista said. She's referred to Advancement Resources. In case you're not aware, Advancement Resources is a training organization that was acquired in March by Huron, and we are very excited to be a part of this larger entity and have access to so many amazing people. Also, we're going to refer to the workshop that they were participated in as Changing Hearts, Changing Minds. Quite often that might come up. We have since shifted that to campaigns of one. So you might hear both of those terminologies as we go through our conversation. Scott, if you don't mind, I think this would be a really good place for us to just step back for a moment and share just a few of the key concepts that Krista's team would have been exposed to when they brought that training in, just so the audience has a little bit more of an understanding of what we mean when we say campaigns of one. So Sadie, would you mind? I think we have a few slides for this, just some imagery to help the audience out.
Yeah, so I think what you're going to see today, and you're going to hear a lot about, is the power of simplicity and the power of focus. Like if you hear anything from us today, it's where do you focus your time? Because we all have 24 hours in a day. And so what I haven't seen the chat, but I want to go through the Pareto principle is alive and well. I don't know if you know what that is. It's 20% of your effort usually results in 80% of your results. Well, I think in philanthropy, it's even less than that. I believe 5% of your benefactors probably represent 95% of your revenue, right? To put another way, and I would love to hear a hands up or a thumbs up in the chat. Do you agree that, man, if you really align 4 or 5 conversations in a beautiful way, that those 4 or 5 conversations inspired in the right way could really move the needle for your organizations? So on the chat, do people agree with that concept? And I think, Sadie, the next slide goes into the 95.5.
We're
Yep,
getting the thumbs up emojis.
getting the thumbs up, right? Okay, so these are thumbs up. Oh, look, they kind of float. That's kind of, oh, look at that. That's kind of fun. Okay, so I just want to pause here for a second, right? So the people that are shaded in the bottom of the pyramid, please hear us that these are not less than benefactors. They're really important, right? But you have aspirational goals. And what usually happens is in smaller organizations like Krista's and the people here, where they don't have these large university teams, your calendar kind of, you spend a lot of time on the base of the pyramid with engagements, events, trying to create big campaigns. And all we're suggesting is how do we focus our time and our energy in that top 5%, which inspired in the right way probably will move the needle a little bit more for your organization. So hopefully that concept resonates with people, and I think from the thumbs up it does.
Excellent. Do you
So
want
a
to, yeah, go
campaign of
ahead.
yeah, so a campaign of one. So here are some shifts that Nancy and Krista and I took a journey on. We, you know, a campaign of one is a highly personalized, benefactor-centric approach to fundraising. All right, in which we work with our specific benefactor and key internal stakeholders to co-create. All right, that's really important. Co-create. When you have a perfect case for support and you have the perfect materials already done, it is very hard to co-create with a benefactor. And how does that create a compelling and investment-worthy vision of a better future that inspires significant long-term philanthropy? The biggest shift in this campaigns of one is a realization that the organizations on this webinar, this is hard to hear, but it's even not even about us. When you work on a campaign of one, it's about the benefactor. It's about their values and how their values, right, can be perpetuated through you. NCC, Kristen and Nancy's organization, it's merely a vehicle for their benefactors to perpetuate their values. And
So
so I
true.
think it's about them. And whenever I do coaching with Nancy and Krista, we talk about the idea a lot, but we talk about the benefactor as much because it's about their story and how it can be perpetuated through them. So there are things that we talk about a lot, and we're going to get into real life stories with Krista and Nancy is this idea of isn't it amazing? And that phrase is isn't it amazing? It's a look back. So when you're looking at your benefactors at the top of the pyramid, there's 3 to 4 that can really move the needle. This is the power of stewardship. When you look back and say, isn't it amazing what we have done together over the past 5, 6, 7 years? And Nancy and Krista have done this through timelines. They've done this through visuals that kind of show what the relationship has been over the past 5 to 6 years, right? And again, because what's going to happen is those benefactors, they don't have that holistic view usually. And for you to look back and say, look what we've been able to accomplish. And then how do we shift the conversation with the benefactor? Maybe even in that same, conversation is, can you imagine? And then today we're going to kind of show you some can you imagine tools that we have used that are not supposed to be standalone tools. They're meant to be walked through in a conversation with people.
Thank you, Scott. I think what I hear you saying as you talk about those two strategies, and I happen to love the phrase "It's not about me." It's been a big advancement resources philosophy for many, many years, and we're bringing that into the work that we're doing at Huron as well. But I think what I hear you say is that both of those pieces are focused almost entirely on the donor or benefactor. It's not our story; it's their story with us.
Totally. But I think what happens, you got to be careful because there's also toxic benefactor-centric philanthropy. So
Ah,
what you don't want to do, and Nancy and Chris are like, if you listen to the benefactor and it doesn't align with your mission and where you want to go, your self-esteem as an organization, it's what you say no to will define you. So we're not
mm.
suggesting that we just listen to what they want to do. And if it has nothing to do with the vision of where NCC wants to go, I think that's a different conversation. I think what Krista does well is align those values where Nancy wants to go. And I think that's the sacredness of the relationship between a development officer and their executive director is listening to the benefactor, but then aligning their passions and their values with the priorities and the vision of the institution.
That's where the magic really
That's where the
happens.
magic is. I mean, Nancy, we can't just do everything benefit. You have to drive your executive directors and they drive vision, not benefactors. But there's a way that the magic can happen with both can be true.
All right, I'm going to shift back then to Krista and Nancy for just a moment. So you bring this into your team and you hear some of these concepts plus others. What were some of the biggest takeaways for the two of you? And it doesn't matter to me who starts.
I'm happy to start if you want to
Sure.
follow. I think for me, there was a mindset of that Scott talks about often of abundance, and it can be really hard in fundraising to stay in that space. A lot of times, organizations feel like there's not enough and not enough money,
Hmm.
and you can get trapped in this cycle. And so I think shifting into a space where we felt really confident in the work that we do and understanding that there are people out there who care, and when they see the work that they'll invest, and trusting that, like there's a trust, a big trust to that, that shifts everything, because you don't spend time on activity and running around and doing things that just aren't going to actually lead you to inspired gifts and the major gifts that you're looking for. And so staying in that mindset's so helpful. Um, and sort of related to that, which I just touched on, was reducing the noise around activity. There's a big difference between activity and proactivity, and that was a huge sort of like aha moment for me in working with Scott. And again, sort of innately new. Like I've been to so many events or hosted events for donors where you're like, this just doesn't lead to the type of conversations, or maybe it's a volunteer event. And it's hard, I think, for organizations sometimes to let go of that stuff. But I was really lucky to have Nancy as my RVP. And there were events where we're like, this is not serving us. We're spending so much time wrapped up in this, and we're not connecting in a genuine way with donors. So let's let it go. And when we let it go, we could still be in that abundance space, right? Like they don't have to be in opposition to one another.
Hmm.
And sort of the third main thing for me was moving away from like really long proposals and documents and campaigns. I've always found typically it's very difficult to use campaign documents. So again, I had always kind of experienced that in my career. But then being able to take those tools of like ideation and co-creation and doing more graphic approaches to proposals and concepts and vision was super inspiring for me. I love it. And we take notebooks and drawing and markers out onto donor visits with us so that we can actually sketch out concepts with donors. And it's such a cool place to vision and think about what the next steps are for a donor, as opposed to just awkwardly sliding a 12-page proposal across the table, right? They feel engaged, they feel connected, it feels comfortable. Everybody walks away feeling really good from that. And so for me, those are kind of like those big takeaways that I really embraced in my team's work and our work, and which I just loved from the
So
work we.
before Nancy jumps in, I just want to, if I may, Maria,
Yeah,
just
go
some
ahead.
comment, just some things I heard there from Krista that just warms my heart. She said, we did these events and it didn't lead to the conversations. See, interesting. Usually it's like people say we had these events and it didn't lead to the gifts.
Mm.
So I think that's a big shift. If you focus on closing gifts, you will lose, right? If you focus on opening conversations, right, where you're having a dialogue, you're going to win usually. And I think Nancy, I think your growth in that time with our together, finding your voice and finding that way that speaks to the mission and the vision of NCC in a way that makes you feel comfortable and inspired, I think really has transformed the spirit of the conversations.
Nancy, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that. And I want to hear a little bit more about what your takeaways were. But I also want to let you know, Krista, I heard you loud and clear, and I know you have a few examples of those pictures. So I promise I will circle back so we have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about those. So Nancy, back over to you. Your takeaways.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a lot about what we do. I think about energy and time and joy. Those words all come up for me in this conversation. And I think I would say that in my early days where I was fundraising. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And now it is my absolute favorite thing to do because we found a space and a way to do it in a way that is just, I actually got chills just now talking about it because the time we have, our work is conserving land, which is my passion, and we get to do that with people that share that passion. It's a natural fit. So we're not going and looking at who has the biggest bank account and trying to meet, just CEOs of companies because they're wealthy. We're figuring out where that alignment is and then creating the conditions that are perfect for that really meaningful connection and conversation. And there's nothing better. Like it's it's what I love doing in my career.
I don't know about you, Scott, but nothing warms my heart more than hearing a leader say that fundraising is one of their favorite things to do. That's amazing.
And I saw a heart there. Thank you for someone that did that. I mean, this is
Yeah.
really cool. I'm really loving this. I think and maybe some thumbs up from folks. I think people want to give to your organization because they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves that will echo beyond their lifetimes, right? Nancy and Krista are in their jobs because they want to be a part of something bigger themselves that will echo beyond their lifetimes. It is a shared goal. We're going to the same place. And it just feels sometimes that we've created some sales-minded approaches to things in a way that just puts us in this sales mentality where we should just be able to take people where they're really wanting to go. Does that make sense to the folks listening in?
All right. Yes, we're getting the
Oh,
thumbs
you
up.
got one. Oh, there's two, Scott.
Yeah, there we go.
Maybe
Thumbs up.
people
So
don't believe you quite yet.
Yeah, I get it.
they have time. We have time. So we have time.
Oh.
There you
Uh,
go. Sometimes.
Wow.
So I'm going to come back to you brought in, you've done some of the training, and then where do you go next? I know, Scott, one of the things that you're really a big proponent of is not to try to do too much at once, but to pick one or two donors and really focus your attention. So tell me about your strategy. Where did you go to start making this your own?
Yeah, I mean, so when we did the workshop with my team, that was really the space where we started to think about like, how do we implement this in a way that works for us? And so we actually even made some shifts on my team. Like Nancy gave me that space and grace to do that. And the team embraced it pretty well. It was a bit hard to get their minds wrapped around. I have both development and communications reporting to me, and essentially communications has shifted into a space where they spend a lot of time supporting the fundraisers so that they can get out the door and do what they need. I mean, Scott has this amazing sort of structure where he really has like this team supporting each individual fundraiser, and they can get out the door and do what they need to do. And I couldn't go that far, but I could sort of mimic some of those structural changes. And I think the team, like all I talk about is joy. Like I don't want anybody to come to work and feel like that fear or be so wrapped up in metrics and the sales pitch that Scott talks about that I know all fundraisers feel icky about. And so I think that was easy for them to embrace and implement. Um, and it's been a bit of a learning experience to really figure out how do we translate the time we spend with donors in person into graphics with maybe a team member who is removed from that conversation and figure out all that structure. And so we spent some time as well trying to nail that to really make sure that if we're advancing a conversation with a donor and we're at that stage where we're ideating and coming up with a concept, that we have the support we need to actually get those graphics ready and shared with that donor. Did that answer your question? I think that was sort of what you were going for.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about the about ideation, just so the audience has a sense of what we're talking about there?
The two themes to take away is focus, right? So we talked, and Krista and Nancy talked about that. What are the 3 to 4 conversations, right? And does your calendar reflect that, right? So if I saw your calendar, would I know that you are spending time, in those most ROI type of benefactors, right? The second piece is simplicity. right? And so you're going to see some tools that Krista and Nancy have created. And it's so simple that it actually, it's almost funny, right? And the use of graphics and pictures, a lot of people won't read what you send them. But if you have a picture or a graphic and you explain the graphic to them, right, as a as a tool, they remember it more and they'll actually start drawing around your drawing, which is really fun. And so we have a framework that's very simple. 3,000-foot view, we imagine, right? We imagine a world, right? So think about what your constituents' experience could be in 5 years. Think about, right? Don't, and it's called the why we are here together. 300-foot view is the what, right? This is what people give to. A lot of times, people and organizations and nonprofits start with the what, and they talk about it being you're a worthy investment, and it's your brag sheet and all of that stuff. And you can raise money doing that, but if you can work with leaders on what does our constituents' futures look like, if we are at this highest level. 300-foot view, what's the what? And what are they going to give to? And then 3-foot view, it's what's the philanthropic opportunity, right? Whether it's, you know, funds for land conservation, or whether it's funds for recruiting faculty, or funds for a piece of an art display. I think that's an easy framework, 3,300 3-foot. And I think that we've got examples of just those visuals that really can tell a story.
We do. And actually, Krista, if you wouldn't mind, the two of you, both you and Nancy, can actually walk us through this, tell us a little bit about the graphics that we're going to be looking at here and what the purpose was, what you used them for. Oh, Sadie's got them up.
I jump in with one reflection on Scott's comment that maybe we aren't capturing too, because we're diving down into the micro level of graphics. But
Oh, please.
The other piece that I was just reflecting on when you're talking, Scott, is that we spend a lot of time you asking me to describe our work and listening to others describe our work and our donors describe our work. And from that, we got very clear language that we use every day in other settings. So there's these sort of ancillary benefits, I think, to having made the space and the time to those, like we're clear now on, we create safe spaces for conversation like that came out of one of those workshops, and I use it over and over again when I'm trying to describe to government or other people what we do in a short amount of time. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
If I'm not mistaken, Scott, you often refer to those as frictionless themes, the things that you can come back to again and again as building blocks.
And I think what Krista will show you is it's very simple what they're doing, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Those are two different things, right? So the amount of time and energy and hours that went into that one visual, it seems natural when you see it, but the amount of work it took, and I think you're right, Krista, I think words change, words create worlds, right? And if we have the language right, it's pretty amazing what could be accomplished.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy, for pulling us back to that as well, because I think that is some of that foundational work that's necessary to make sure that we're finding that overlap between what's really important to the organization and what's really important to the donor or benefactor. Okay, now let's take a look at some of those pictures.
Yeah. So this was a bit of a fun concept, actually, that we had put together. And so what I love about this, I think, is that it can actually be used for a lot of different purposes, and I can touch on that a little bit. I would call this more 300-foot view, and maybe getting into 3-foot view, Scott, you might agree with me. This was after we had set a vision of like, what could we accomplish together with a donor? And it's the broadest level of what we do in our work. And what I love about this, I think, is that, and I think people maybe on the call who aren't necessarily in higher education or in a hospital setting, where sometimes innovation is the thing that they're trying to sell. if you're in an organization where your mission is very specific, it can almost sometimes feel like it's too simple. Like, how do we beef this up without like going off in a completely different direction? And so what I loved about this activity for us and for our team and for the donor was like when we actually wrote down what it is that we do, there's a lot there. And so what I love about this graphic is I think that it talks very much about like who we are and what they know of us. It talks about all of these areas that they're interested in learning more about. And it can be used multiple times and in multiple ways for different donors because it provides the donors with an opportunity to see themselves here in the work, right? So perhaps it's not going to be a donor that gives us 10 million to establish a fund to do our highest level of work. Maybe it's a donor who's like, I really want to give you guys the time and space to build a relationship with partners and collaborators and Indigenous nations. And what does that look like? And so they can point to those areas in the work and that very broad level of work to decide where they want to support. And so this was created for a specific donor, and she has helped us establish a fund at the broadest level. And so we just wanted to share this concept, and it's evergreen in the sense that it could be used elsewhere when we get into those conversations with other donors as well.
I think you're saying something really important, that even though this was work that was bespoke for a very specific donor, the end result was not only something that resonated with her that she wanted to invest in, but it gave you something that you could actually share with other donors who maybe are not at the bespoke level to say, where would you like to plug into this
Yeah.
this bigger vision? And so eventually it gets there, but you're really starting with that top of the pyramid that Scott was talking about. I really like that.
Well, and they also put what you said too was like where did they see themselves? And this
Yeah.
particular benefactor saw herself everywhere, which is great.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
hope all of you listening, they want to take a bite of the entire apple. But there are other benefactors that they might not have the capacity, or you haven't earned that conversation, right? So this tool allows you to break it up to say, you know what, they're really interested in this Indigenous population, and you could just say, as a next step, let me blow up that piece, and I'll talk to you about how philanthropy can move the needle in the Indigenous collaboration, right? And so you don't have it done at that visit. You actually learn from where they want to play, and then you can create you show the opportunities within each one of the pieces.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So we can move to the next one. So this was actually one of the first graphics we ever did. It's kind of funny to go back to this one. It feels like a little bit of a step back, but what's interesting about this is that this is definitely more of a visionary graphic. So this was created as well for a corporation, which is kind of interesting because we're talking mostly about individuals and foundations. But I also just wanted to add that like we're now taking these concepts of how we work and applying it to like government and to corporations, because our feeling is that when you connect with individuals in those spaces, they're the people who get passionate about moving things forward. And so we're treating government staff, we're treating individuals and corporations, usually people who we have relationship with already, very much like we would an individual donor to advance that relationship. And so we put this concept in front of a corporate donor, and it was really about setting the vision. They wanted to get their company to a place where they could make really big declarations about what they're able to do for nature. And so we wanted to show how that would happen with them in partnership and with an investment in some of the work that we were doing. And this graphic helped lead towards a $12 million gift. So and they actually started using very similar language around net positive for nature. So
If you walk them through this, like let's pretend I'm a benefactor.
Yeah.
Could you
Yeah.
walk me through? I know it's been a couple years, but walk me
Yeah.
through it, because I think that's what people want to. So how do you use this?
How do you
Yeah.
talk to the donor about
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, so what we really wanted for us, we understood that the company and the donors would want to have that sort of broad scale impact. But for them, it was about saying like that they had clout in an area, and that we were the delivery partner that could help make that happen. So we looked at it from the provincial scale, which is the fact that like if they invested, they could help us reach 11 million hectares conserved, which leads into the national 30 by 30 goal that was set by Canada, which could also actually influence more broadly. So there's countries that are leading on 30 by 30, 30% of land conserved by 2030. And if Canada is able to get there, then we're a global leader. And so we wanted to show that the impact of them giving to us in BC just isn't an impact in BC. It can actually be much broader. And so that was how the conversation really evolved, and that they could step up and make that leadership gift and be the ones to sort of influence things in the right direction. Just to be really clear, though, $12 million does not get you 11 million hectares. So that was like more like, yeah.
But what this does though, what I loved about what you did here, it also creates phases too, right? Like they could be at the provincial side, which would be a certain amount. If they wanted to grow their investment, they could have a national impact, or if they wanted to do the full 12 million, right? It shows you, it could see where they wanted to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. I think we have one. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one more. It's broken up over 2 slides. So this is just like looking at something from more of a project level. So and applying the concepts that we've learned. Because again, like as a fundraiser, you're always going to have a certain project you have to fundraise for. Like it's just the reality of the work, and you're not always going to be able to go into every conversation. You might have something very specific in mind. But we wanted to use the same concepts, the same way of looking at things and describing the work for our projects. And so we started to think about a big project we're working on and describing it, because again, as Scott said, the outcome maybe seems really simple, but the work is complex. So how do we tell that complex story in a really short graphical way? And so we really wanted to show that our history and our trust in the communities with 20 years of conservation experience there enables an opportunity. So when a time-sensitive opportunity comes up, we've already got the trust there. That's why NCC is great to invest in. We move on this huge opportunity, and it really unlocks what mostly the donors interested in, which is that globally significant and landscape scale conservation impacts. That might not tell you a lot if you're not super involved in the work. And so when you move into the next slide, you'll see we take it a little bit further by giving the donor a little bit more information to understand what is it exactly that we're talking about. It's not pages and pages of information. It's just enough for them to get their head around that concept and say, yeah, that's amazing. Like I want to be able to enable you to do that when that opportunity becomes available to make it happen. And so I like to be able to show and wanted to be able to show like that sometimes that graphic is just not enough, and you might talk it through with them, and you might want to leave them with a piece that goes a little bit further into those details. And this is what this graphic does here.
Nice. I love the way that actually builds. But I also like what you said about you're still talking them through it. These are not meant to be standalone pieces. They're meant to be conversational, but you're giving them enough that when they're finished with the conversation and they come back and they look at this graphic later, they remember the conversation that you're having. I love that.
Yeah,
That's
Krista,
really
go ahead, Krista.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to say too, these are fully fleshed out concepts. So you might be sitting with a donor and sketch something out on a piece of paper that's really rough, and then have that opportunity to say with, Scott, you were saying, can you imagine a world where we come back with something on paper? Can we put this down on paper for you? And then bring that together in a more refined way. And come back together with them, or let them sit with it and think about it, and come back and talk through the graphic again and identify where they sort of see themselves within that concept. Because again, if it's true co-creation, true ideation, you might not have a fully fleshed out project. And so you might be sketching something out on the napkin at the restaurant.
There's an element too of the flexibility that because you're having these conversations with higher level donors and you can walk them through the visioning exercise, you can get them to, that sounds terrible language. If they're interested and they have a vision, you can have them give in a way that's flexible enough that you can capitalize on opportunities when they come up. And that has really been game changing for us to be able to have donors that have already pledged funds or even given funds, so that because our opportunities are really intermittent, and so we need, when we have to go, we have to go fast. We don't have time to go and raise for a particular project. So it's just an important piece of the shift there.
Well, I think Nancy, I want to piggyback on that. I think how you got there and how we got there was through an ideation with the benefactor.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that was interesting was the she saw the why of giving is to give you speed and flexibility to make decisions quicker. And speed and flexibility, you see that in the second one, urgent time limited opportunity emerges, right? And so you've created this beautiful narrative of flexibility and speed, and it's really helped your unrestricted dollars because the benefactors understand why that's so important.
You said something really important there, and I just want to pick up on that for the group, for the audience that's participating here today. I know that you had the donor or benefactor participate in ideation. That doesn't always happen, but what I do know is important, and I just wanted to emphasize this from our previous conversations, that a benefactor is always at play. So we're never doing this work without knowing that we have a benefactor who has expressed a real deep interest and passion for the work that we're doing, and we're creating something with them in mind. So we're not going to create something and then try to go out and sell it. This, you brought a benefactor along in that journey, and I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think that's a not trivial concept because I think when Krista and Nancy and I meet, it's all about we talk about the benefactor. They've already got permission to put something into paper, and then they move on that based on the conversation. Because what starts to happen is if you don't do it that way, especially at the top of the pyramid, you're on a fishing expedition. You have no idea what would resonate with these people. But yet, when you have the opening conversations about concepts and vision, and they tell you where they want to play, it's a better experience for them, but two, it's very valuable information for the institution because they can start crafting things based on that conversation.
Hmm. Thank you. Sadie, I think you can stop sharing the presentation for a moment. And we're going to be, I'll just let the audience know, we're going to be opening up for some of those questions here shortly. But before I do that, Kristen, Nancy, I just want you to give us an idea of the growth that you have experienced having adopted this approach, this campaigns of a one approach. And either one of you can start.
You know, you mentioned it off the top, Maria, about like, you know, you asked me to put pen to paper, and I think I can confidently say that like $35 million in gifts in the last 36 months, there has been some tool, nugget, tip that has come through our work with Scott and this focus that has really helped us get there. Like it touches everything we do. I feel a lot more confident talking with donors at that $5 million plus level. So coming from the University of British Columbia, I just hadn't been exposed, interestingly, to those types of conversations. And as Scott said, you're not going in with something pre-baked. It's literally a conversation to understand what their passions and desires are and what they envision and seeing where that might align with what you're doing. And it just takes all that pressure of prep and coming up with something and having something in writing off the table. And there's so much more space in that. And then for me, I think like joy is tenfold. Like it's just we pinch ourselves all the time. And when you're like we're really lucky we get to go out on the land with donors and walk them around. And so they literally walk on things that they have helped to conserve and care about. But there's just something so magical in that. And when you're again in that space of abundance and joy, it just sort of filters out and it creates something that really attracts more investment. And we almost pinch ourselves because we're like, oh, okay, somebody else has just come out of the woodwork and they do exactly what, or they're interested in exactly what we do. And it creates a momentum that you can't really stop once you get into that. So for me, those were the biggest, I think, things to come out of it that has really amplified our work.
And I think sort of the ripple of that. So once we had the confidence in funding, then we're more confident in the projects that we take on.
Yeah.
which then build, and so we're, you know, we can imagine actually doing bigger conservation projects and getting stuff done in a tight timeline. And so we take on really important work and with more confidence. And so then, and that just builds, yeah. And it's fun.
So much fun. Yeah, truly. It's a joy.
That's got to feel good, Scott, to hear that, the work that they're doing. I would love to open it up for a few questions from the audience. If we had anything that came in through the chat, Sadie, I'm going to rely on you.
Nothing so far.
Nothing so far. All right. If anything does come up, feel free to put it in the chat and Sadie will let us know. With that, Scott, I have a question for you. As you, this is a very different organization than CU Anschutz Medical Campus, right? So undoubtedly, you learned something along the way. I'm curious, what did you learn from working with these amazing people?
Model of focus at the top of the pyramid is for smaller organizations. Because your time is limited and your resources is limited, right? I mean, you don't have the luxury, and you're probably wearing many hats, in wherever you're sitting. And so it's what you say no to will define you as an organization. And you can be busy. And I understand that you've got board members and others that are maybe telling you to do certain things, and deep down in places you don't want to admit, you know that it's probably not the right work. And so you might politically have to do that, but please take some time to figure out what is our strategy. How do we create amazing philanthropic conversations with our top of our benefactors? And make sure that your calendar reflects that. I think what I've learned with Nancy and Chris, they're so small, but they're mighty. And I was struck by how they've scaled this in a way in a small organization that I wasn't expecting.
Hmm, beautifully said. So, Krista, Nancy, where do you plan to take this work next?
That's a good question. Well, definitely we'll keep doing coaching with Scott. There's no doubt about that. We've got some stuff lined up. I think for me, like I've had a lot of colleagues across the country at NCC ask about this work that we're doing and want to understand it more. And so we've actually shared tools. So like the timeline tool that Scott referred to, we've shared that, and even the president's office has used it for donors. And so I'd like to think about how do we continue to give those resources to fundraisers across the country so that they experience that joy and feel confident entering these conversations with donors.
I'm glad you mentioned,
Questions pop up there, Maria. So I
There's
didn't.
some
Oh.
questions here.
This
So they're in
moment.
the Q&A from Melanie. So this is
Oh,
for
they're in the
Krista.
Q&A, not the
Yeah.
chat. All right.
So Krista, how did you pivot or change your approach once you started? What do you know now that you wish you would have known when you started doing this?
Great question.
Oh God, that's a really good question. I think not to be afraid of letting things go. Like I did it, but I didn't do it without fear. Like there's always fear of not being busy enough and not making something happen. And so I think if I had let that go earlier, I might have gotten going a little bit faster. And so and just making sure that I could operate in that space and that mindset. Maybe I'd go back and say that. But I haven't regretted the process at all. Like it's worked out exactly how I would hope and dream it could.
I think a piece for me too is that it's, although there's like the training is fantastic, but it's clear to me that the ongoing coaching is still so important. Like it takes that ongoing conversation. It's not just a package of information that you can go and implement. I mean, it helps, but being in continual coaching conversations is super powerful.
Excellent. There's another question here about how have you gained buy-in and it just slid away from me. Buy-in to investing in this approach and championed or trained your team into embracing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like it's demonstrated success, right? And I think Scott, you've had this experience as well. Like it's pretty hard to like because the numbers then don't lie, right? So we don't. I don't care about metrics that much, but like I want to see the project get done and I love getting gifts in the door. And when you're successful and you've got $5 million gifts rolling in, it's pretty hard to argue that you're doing anything wrong. And so I think that buy-in comes from people wanting to be part of that. And when you are operating in a space, again, from abundance, not scarcity, and in a joyful state, everybody wants to be a part of that. So people start naturally being drawn to that. It's the same
I think you're
experience.
not giving, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. I think you spent, you had Hodge and I out there for 2 days. I mean, like
Yeah.
Nancy gave us 2 full days and she had her deputy there. I mean, if, if you want to, people want transformational philanthropy, but is the organization ready to be transformed? And it was very clear through your calendar that you were going to spend a lot of time. Nancy, in particular, spent a lot of time. And I think when people started seeing Nancy being like, this is interesting, I think people just started to just jump on board.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
Scott.
think, I think too, for us, I mean, it just, it's so fun, and because we said no to a lot of sort of events and pieces that were not so fun, and not that we don't do any, but we don't do as much. And I think what you said, Scott, about that clarity of knowing where to spend time, and know and actually being able to, the proof's in the pudding. Yeah, like we're getting gifts with good relationships, and we're actually delivering on our core mandate, which is conservation. Being able to connect all those dots, and for people to not feel burnt out and stressed because their calendars are not overwhelming, like just that breath is really important.
Thank you, Nancy. I have another question here. Can you elaborate on what is brought to a donor meeting to discuss their vision? We have someone
Nothing.
who, nothing. I was
Blank
hoping that was
paper.
the answer.
Yeah.
Or
Like
sometimes
nothing.
really nice markers.
Really nice markers for sure. For sure. Food.
Yeah, food for sure.
Yeah, like
And depending on the donor, wine and beer.
yeah, we spend way more time thinking about what environment are we creating in that donor than anything we're bringing with us. Maybe occasionally if we know that a donor really likes a certain geography, we might have a previously created document in our back pocket, but we rarely, if ever, pull it out. And we spend all the time thinking about what are we, and Scott will coach us through these things, like what do we want them to think, feel, experience, smell, taste, look at, and create that environment. So nothing.
That was exactly the answer I hoped for.
I think too, the part that I love is just the right people in the room. Like, so when someone has a passion, let's say it's birds, then we'll bring somebody that knows about birds, depending on the context, right? But someone that can really relate specifically to their interests as well, with Krista at their side. So just that, finding that blend of the right people at the right time, as being important.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions about the board and whether or not you engaged them, and if so, how they responded. I'm curious, have you engaged your board at all in this work?
I think I would say not as much. We are very clear for our board that this is how we're working, and we're a bit unusual at NCC. We have a national board that is responsible for all of the typical board things, fiduciary responsibilities, fundraising, auditing, all of that stuff. We have regional advisory boards in our regional operating units. So we have a regional operating board. I would say they're incredibly supportive of the way that we're doing the work. And that's because they can also see the outcome, and it actually cuts down on the amount of time. Like I think every board member, and I think it's actually becoming a thing of the past. Like people are getting sick of being asked, who do you know? Who can you connect me with? Can you ask your friend for money? And it just doesn't work as well as it used to maybe in the past. It's kind of, for me, I find it old school. And so I think they'd rather just be connected into the work and see the joy of the donors. And so where it makes sense, we would bring board member out if they know the donor and that connection can happen. We've had that happen in the past with a corporate donor. We've had a board member come out and have them experience that space where it's like, don't worry about opening up a boardroom for us. We're just going to go with this donor who we know cares about us and wants to see something great happen.
Thank you. Scott, this one's for you because I think you're well positioned to answer it. For organizations who are not using this type of fundraising approach, what are some conversation starters with donors that you recommend using to open the possibility of co-creation and ideation?
I think this is, so there's another question there about, do you do this with newer donors? Usually we do this with people that really love your organization. These are people that have long lasting good benefactor, good giving history. That's why I love the role of Krista and development directors in this, because there are times where we say this a lot, and I'll say this, hey, I want you to know that Dr. So-and-so, Dr. Smith is thinking a little bit bigger. And just wanted to know if you'd be open to a conversation about how your philanthropy can move the needle. Would you be open to that? So you could probably see yourself saying something like that, where insert executive director's name. I want you to know that Nancy's thinking a little bit bigger about, where we're going. And are you open to having a bigger conversation? And just see what they say, right? The Hodge always, and here's some homework. You guys should Google Hodge and TED Talk. Because that TED Talk, it's 17 minutes. That I think you could really, it's really a good foundational work on this. But create questions that's hard to say no to. Hey, we really would like to talk to you about an idea about how our art museum could really move the needle as an economic anchor in the community. Would you be open to being a part of that? That's hard to say no to. No, I don't want to do that. Okay. Well, then clarity is kindness.
One way or another. That's right. All right, we're coming to the end of our time. So I wanted to come back. Krista, Nancy, any final words of advice to our audience out there who might be thinking about embracing this kind of work with their own donors and benefactors?
Jump in.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, if like you're at all on the, like if you're thinking about going to the Campaign of One workshop and you're kind of waffling or you're not sure, just go and do it. It will be the best investment you can make, and the tools that you will take away from that experience will be things you integrate every day into your work, and it will be the best investment you can make. So go do it.
Wow, what a great transition into my conclusion. So beautifully done. That brings us to the end of our discussion today. So thank you, Nancy, Krista. I really appreciate you being here. Scott, thank you for spending the time with all of us here today. And thank you to all of our participants who joined us. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about the Campaigns of One approach, we are going to be in Denver on September 10th and 11th. And so please consider joining us there. We'd love to have you. And we will follow up. All of the participants should receive some follow-up materials with that information, should you be interested, probably in the next week or two. So with that, I just want to wish all of you a wonderful day. Go out, make amazing things happen for you, for your organizations, and most importantly, for your donors and benefactors who are invested in your work. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.